All right, so we are live here. Keys, are you more surprised Iowa didn't score 50 points or that Taylor Swift wasn't watching the game with me Sunday?
That's a good one, but it's really not that hard. I really thought that Brian Ferentz was going to go all out to get that 95 or 96 points that he needed to save his job, and that Iowa was going to score big. So I'm not surprised Taylor Swift didn't spend time with you at all anyway.
Yeah, that is kind of a big surprise here. All right, man, we got a great show ready. Here's the theme song. Yes! Yes! Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, God, I am jacked up today, Keys. I have not even had an energy drink yet.
I'm sure it was that 8-ball you just did, though.
That's definitely possible. Definitely possible. Oh, man, it's Dan Talks Football here. It's funny. I'm going to say this, but it was a great week of games. Even though my team lost, I'm still mad about it. The black jersey is sweet. I'm just kind of blown away. I love it. So I know now what to ask Santa for Christmas.
I'm just doing this because I know you're superstitious. We lost the last time I wore it, so I wanted to wear it again.
Well, don't wear it Friday.
I'm not superstitious.
I'm not superstitious either, but I wore these Michigan colored shoes and shorts during the live stream. I'm not doing either one of those again.
Oh, so it's your fault.
It is my fault. I switched it up to try to go comfort because sometimes I get kind of warm, and I was like, hey, shorts and these comfortable New Balance shoes. For those of you who do not know, man, this is Keas from the Bak Talk Brothers. The link to his channel is in the description. If I am correct, you are going live tomorrow night with the talent and Aaron. Is that correct?
100%. 7 p.m. Arrowhead time.
Oh man, it's going to be good. I'm excited for it. Great week of games. A lot of things to go over. TVE Ace of Spades ripoff.
The
Ace of Spades ripoff. The Ace of Spades ripoff? What did I rip off? One Pride. What's up, brother? Got One Pride here. Keys, normally, all I want to do is I just want to talk football. By the way, my picks video is fantastic. It was released late, but it's fantastic. Check it out. I want to change gears. And I want to talk a little college football. All right. I keep wanting to call it the Final Four, but it's the college football playoff. I'll get that stuck in my head one of these days. So here's the way it works. Michigan, the 1 seed, will play Alabama, the 4 seed. The number 2 seed was Washington, and the number 3 seed was Texas. So I'm just going to open for them. I have my thoughts. I have my opinions. I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I assume you're talking about no Georgia on there.
Yes, I'm going to rant on that. That's how I'm going to start my rant, but I want to hear from you first.
Hey, it's kind of like how nobody wants Patrick Mahomes to win another MVP or the Chiefs to make another Super Bowl. People are fatigued of Georgia which is crazy because if you're a football fan in general, you should want to see good football. And when people are putting on offensive, defensive coaching tape, a lot of times it's of Georgia football. So it's an absolute travesty, controversy, whatever C or E you want to word you want to throw on there, whatever adjective, pull out your thesaurus, whatever it is, it's ridiculous that Georgia is not in there. Sorry, I know that Alabama won by 3 points in overtime, had an insane throw and catch in that game to do so against Georgia at home by 3 points, but they're not better than Georgia. Sorry, Gooch, I said it. They're the best team in college football, and leaving them out is like you're trying to make sure that a different team wins instead of the best team, which is absolutely insane.
I couldn't say that any better myself. I tweeted this out. I said, sorry, Texas, sorry, Florida State, but it's got to be Michigan, Washington, Alabama, and Georgia. And I was really excited because I thought we were going to see Michigan against Georgia that first game, simply because that's the game we should have got last year. Instead, TCU got in. And I mean, kudos to TCU. Great job winning the game, doing all that. I watched them play several times. They weren't one of the 5 best teams in football. I know there's 4, but I'm just saying I watch enough football. I know a top 5 team when I see one. TCU was not it. Great. You won, that game against Michigan. Fantastic. Great. I'm sorry. I just want to piggyback on this. I don't get it. I get Alabama getting in. I don't get Georgia not getting in. I just don't see it. And I'll go a step further. Texas doesn't belong in. I don't think Texas belongs in. I'm fully aware they went down to Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama week 3. They're both different teams at this juncture in the season. That's the one thing about college football. Teams can get better during the college football season. They can't. Well, they can in the pros. It does happen, but you see it a lot more often in college. I think we're almost on board here. Let me ask you this here. Florida State, 13-0. They won a Power 5 conference title while going undefeated. Do they have a legitimate claim?
Well, let me ask you this, because Iowa was a really terrible penalty away from beating Minnesota and being a 1-loss team. If they had won their other game and had somehow beat Michigan, even though that Iowa was 13-0, would you say that they should be in with no offense?
No, listen, I agree. I was really shocked that I saw on social media more people upset at Florida State not getting in than they were about Georgia, because I just assumed Georgia would get in. I thought even with a loss, I just assumed they were going to get in. My big question was Alabama going to get snubbed? I can't get over it. I really can't get over it. Let me throw out another curveball here. Is there a team that stands out as that's going to win this?
Well, it would be easily Georgia if they were playing. Yeah, I think that Alabama and Michigan will be entertaining to watch. Yeah, I'm not sure. I would probably lean Alabama now.
I got whoever wins between Alabama and Michigan. I don't think the winner of Washington or Texas is really going to put up much of a fight. Don't get me wrong. I'm actually really excited to watch that Texas-Washington game. whoever wins is just. I really think that it kind of stinks because I think you got the two best teams in Michigan and Alabama playing each other, and you got, kudos to Washington, by the way, ending the Pac-12 with something amazing. But yeah. And by the way, that Rome Uli, I'm butchering his name. I love that kid. I have a major draft crush on him. He's probably going to go top 10. I am head over heels in love with that kid, but and I'm excited to watch him play. But I have a hard time believing Washington or Texas is going to be, especially what happens if we see Texas and Alabama again? Does anybody really think Texas is going to beat Alabama twice? Does anybody really believe that? So, real quick, One Pride. Yeah, we're in a group chat. We didn't really hear from you, so me and Keas, we kind of communicate during the week. I do like kind of an outline. My apology to Keas this week because this outline I sent them was a little incomplete, but we really didn't hear from you. I'll DM you after the show and we'll go ahead and iron things out. Okay. I use something called Filmora, and it has all this. It turns out to be that even though I do pay a subscription to Filmora, some of the music that is being used is actually a copyright infringement. So I had to go back and change it. This music I put in is not. I didn't know it sounded like Ace. Is that? Are you talking about? Is it Ace of Base or is it Ace? Okay, he was saying Ace of Base. Yeah, is that the group that sings the Sign song? You know what I'm talking about? Okay, all right. Yeah. So I guess I used to Ace of Base music. I kind of like it though. I kind of like it. So I had kind of my rant. I'm mad at college football. Georgia's going to play Florida State. I think Georgia's going to win 27-0 against a fourth string quarterback. And I have no idea. I believe it's going to be next year, 2 years from now, it's going to go from 4 to 12. And in that case, we don't have to have this conversation. Actually, you know what? We will have this conversation. There'll be a 13 or 14 10-3 team that didn't get in that we're going to talk about later on. But Keas, before we move on to the NFL, is there anything else that you want to add about the college football playoff?
No, it just seems like they're getting worse and worse, but we've been arguing over what teams play in the national championship for 3 decades now. So I don't know what the best answer is because every single system they'd come up with.
It was funny. I wish I kept it. I remember Jason Whitlock had this great article about college football, and he says everything was great with college football. It's like being in a relationship with a girl and everything's perfect. Then she gets around her girlfriends and her girlfriends tell her that everything that he's doing wrong. And then next thing you know, you see your girl again and she's telling you everything that went wrong when in reality, everything was perfect until somebody said something. I could go into detail to the history of why this happened, the complaints, but I wish it'd go back. I really wish the biggest game of the year was not the college championship, but the rivalry games like Alabama, Auburn. I mean, that game, that should have been the biggest game of the year for Alabama. Now it's fifth? I mean, maybe one of the greatest Iron Bowls of all time. That's like the fifth most important game on Alabama's schedule. Ohio State, Michigan, that should be the biggest game of the year, not, game number 3 or 4. But my dad calls me a grumpy old man, and I'm just going to complain. It's going to keep changing. It's going to go from 12 to 16. So, all right. Let's go to what we know best, Keas. We're going to talk NFL, and I'm going to start off with who had the worst weekend. Is it the Kansas City Chiefs or the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Yeah. This is going to come out later or it'll be justified later, but I'm going to go with the Jags on this one. Probably surprising to you and many others.
Yeah, I actually do also. Now, we got news earlier today that Trevor Lawrence injury is relatively minor. It's a high ankle sprain for those of you who might remember. Patrick Mahomes had a high ankle sprain and led the Chiefs to a Super Bowl. It's not something that you can overcome. It is something that you can't overcome. It's going to linger. There's no bye week unless they get a bye. He's not really going to have any rest, so he's not going to be 100%. Running the ball is a big part of Trevor Lawrence's game and something he was doing rather effectively. I think that if he didn't get hurt, CJ Beathard from Iowa stepped in and did a really good job, but I think they win the game with Trevor Lawrence. Am I just crazy or is it just one of those games? I mean, am I nuts?
Well, that's yes, but beside that, well, I think the biggest thing though is right. It's easy for us to look at what Mahomes did and say, any other quarterback should be able to do that or can do that. Bobby Stroop, Patrick Mahomes' trainer, is top notch. He's the best in the game. You're the personal trainer to the best player in the NFL for a reason. And one of the things they work on is, that his ankle stability. They are proactive in preventative exercises and training, for each of those things. But one of the things that he said kind of after the Super Bowl, Bobby, that is, was that, part of it is has to do with the location of the high ankle sprain. There were certain movements that Patrick could make, and those were the ones that they emphasized. And those were the ones, that was part of the game plan that they emphasized. But there were other movements, I think more laterally, that, he was in way more pain in moving them. So it's not just so much, oh, you have an high ankle sprain, you can't, move your ankle at all without pain. No, it's kind of the various range of motion, depending on, where the high ankle sprain is, because, a sprain is a tear. So that's part of it. But are you crazy for saying that if Trevor Lawrence had been playing that they would have won? I don't think so at all. I had a tweet today. Orlando Brown Jr. came out and basically called ESPN's crew a bunch of dumb whatever, or jackasses or something, for picking against the Bengals. And one of the things I said was, it's a really stupid thing to say, because how would ESPN's crew know that Trevor Lawrence was going to get injured and this game was going to go to the last minute of overtime? The last minute of overtime with CJ Beathard in. You couldn't win until the last minute of overtime with CJ Beathard in. And listen, it's one of my Iowa guys. I was rooting for him to look good, but I didn't think he looked good. And he's coming in last moment. It's not like the Bengals where, they've now had time to prepare their backup quarterback. And hell, they still have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Boyd and Mixon, and they still have all their weapons out there. To me, this game kind of proved that Joe Burrow is a little bit more of a system quarterback, or more of a tad bit more production based on the weapons he has around him than some people are comfortable admitting. So I don't think it's crazy at all to say that, Dan. The Bengals were lucky. If Trevor Lawrence finishes this game without that injury, they lose and Orlando shuts up.
You heard it here first. Keas calls Joe Burrow a system quarterback, and that's it. Quit saying he's better than Mahomes. He's a system quarterback. I got Denver Gator. What's up, brother? He says he hates Florida State and Georgia. As a Gators fan, I can honestly say FSU got screwed. Now Bama needs to win it all to justify being put in. I keep seeing people just like yourself, Denver Gator, that say Florida State got screwed. I don't think so. You're down to quarterback number 3. I know ACC is a Power 5 conference, but I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think that's just what people say when they know the team isn't good enough to actually be in this system. Like, they shouldn't be one of the 4 teams, but they have the record. Listen, if it was Iowa, like I said, if Iowa was 13-0, I would be saying the same thing, while in my heart, I would know Iowa isn't hanging with Alabama or Georgia or Michigan, those types of teams. But I realized, Dan, I didn't answer the actual question, which was worse. I said Jags.
Yeah.
But I didn't really give my reason for it. For me, it's like, if you look at the schedule moving forward, I think it's a little bit more difficult for the Jags, and especially if Trevor Lawrence misses the rest of the season. I think that makes it an uphill climb. Now, they have a good record, which is going to make it so that they're probably still going to win their division, or, at least have a fairly comfortable wild card berth. But, Kansas City, I mean, the thing is the Ravens schedule looks very brutal the rest of the way. They're playing all playoff teams, basically, their last 5 games. Like, if they keep the number 1 seed, they're going to earn it. But Kansas City basically, they just have to tie these teams? Or am I wrong on that now?
Well, the way it works is that Baltimore and Miami are 9-3, and Kansas City and Jacksonville are 8-4. So there was a chance that the way it would have worked, Kansas City would have had the 1 seed. Jacksonville would have had the 2 seed, but going into Monday night with the Chiefs loss, Jacksonville would have had the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. But
right, I'm talking about if they end this
determined.
I'm talking about if they end the season all tied, the tiebreakers for that.
Well, I mean, Kansas City would hold it over Miami and Jacksonville. It goes conference. If I remember correctly, it goes conference, then division. The thing that's scary about this Jacksonville loss is that both Indianapolis and Houston are sitting there at 7-5. And I know you got a great chart that I'm dying to kind of break into. I do want to answer this. I'm going a little out of order here because Perry asked a fantastic question, and I want Keas to answer this one first because I already know my answer. Do you think the Jags should sit Trevor Lawrence for a game or 2? The way it is that he has a high ankle sprain. He is going to play. He's fine. People are betting heavily on Cleveland. I did my video. Cleveland was a 2-point favorite with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. It's already jumped up to 3. So action is not only going heavy towards Cleveland, it's continuing to go on Cleveland. People really like the Browns this week.
That's a hard one. I think for me, listen, I think you're probably losing this game one way or the other. Trevor Lawrence with a high ankle sprain, we can't just assume he can do what Mahomes did because he's not even close to Mahomes' caliber. And that's no disrespect to him. That's more about, Mahomes' floor and ceiling. You're going up against Myles Garrett and the rest of that defense. Like, they're sharks in the water right now. And we've seen it as Chiefs fans, right? And maybe a little karma, irony, whatever you're going to call it, because the Jacksonville Jaguars were a bunch of jackasses trying to further hurt Mahomes' ankle in the playoffs. And so I think you would see that in this game if you start him this week. I think you're better off just realizing you're probably going to lose anyway, being okay with that, give him that extra week so he can be, 10, 15, 20% better for that Ravens game, because that game is going to be more crucial and the rest of that stretch is going to be more crucial. Give him a week to listen to the Dolphins sex sounds and come back better than letting him be an immobile target for Myles Garrett to go to town on.
That's a fantastic answer, and I was a little surprised about it. I'm just the opposite. I think if he can play even at 70%, he's got to play. You lose any games, you're in danger of losing that home field game. You still have a shot for the 1 seed. You still have the shot for the 1 seed. I think you got to play through it. It sucks. I know it sucks. It's 5 weeks of football. It's 5 brutal weeks. You're not going to be sitting. If you told, now I will say this, Perry, if you told him he sits out for a game and he comes back and he's 100%, sit out for a week. I don't think sitting out is going to put him at 100%. I just think you put the best option in at quarterback. Don't get me wrong. I thought CJ Beathard didn't do bad off the bench, being ice cold. He gets maybe 3 reps a month with the starting unit. I mean, seriously, that's kind of, no. So, we disagree on this one.
Well, I mean, I think the big thing is you said if he's 70%, I don't think that's possible. I think Mahomes after his might have been 60, 70% that first game. But again, even then, their 70% are way different. And I just think, especially when you go up against that Browns pass rush,
that's going to be tough, man.
I just think you are begging for Trevor to get more injured, and then you've completely thrown your season away. Why? Because you want to keep the highest seed possible. I think the play is you let him get as healthy as possible, because you're going to need him for the Ravens game. If he plays this game, he's not going to really get much healthier at all for that Ravens game. And to me, you need him as healthy as possible, because it's already going to be an uphill battle for that game. And so for me, it's kind of like not getting stuck in this mindset of, we gotta be still battling for the number 1 seed, or we got to keep our position as the number 2. You got to play in the long game, get an invite to the dance, and then go out and do your business.
Well, I mean, the thing is that they're only 1 game behind both Houston and Indianapolis in the AFC South race. I firmly believe that there's going to be a 10-win team that's going to be on the outside looking in. That's why I think that Jacksonville, and all of us agree here, the Jacksonville loss was way worse. Jacksonville goes from the 1 to the 4 seed, and the Jags. This is a game you had to win if you're Jacksonville. This is a game you absolutely had to win. Kansas City is just fine, to be honest with you. The games that they lost, all
the ones non-conference games. So
I think all of them are non-conference games, and I think there's
Denver.
Denver's the only one, and that was a fluky thing. I know Denver Gators still mad at the Broncos for that. He hates that, but I mean, look, you beat Denver 85 straight times. You lose one, it's okay. It's okay, but we both agree that the Jacksonville game was much worse. Keas thinks Lawrence should sit a week. I don't, but that's me and Keas. We disagree sometimes. Perry says, Keas and One Pride, have you guys scouted any college players yet? I don't know if One Pride's still there. If he's here, I'd love to hear his input. Keas, what do you do in regards to the college game?
Yeah, I won't get into that until probably Senior Bowl practice time.
Yeah, right after the combine, Perry. This is Draft Central. The wide receiver, I need to learn how to pronounce his name. Rome Olukun, something like that. Okan, something like that. I had such a man crush on him. The Heisman finalists came out. If you didn't see, we'll dive into that later on. The Heisman voting. I think it's in a couple of weeks. I don't have to look, but I'm going to do some breakdowns on players. Maybe not a lot, but I'm going to do a ton of mock drafts, and I'm hopeful I can get Keas coming on. We can debate which players would be better fits at which teams, and we can also debate on what Kansas City does in the first round. So, Kansas City went up against a hot team in the Packers. They played a good game. That happens. Yeah. I mean, give kudos to the Pack. I mean, Funk put in one of my comments that, hey, maybe that loss against the Lions wasn't so bad after all. Maybe Green Bay got hot. I will say this, that they drafted 3 receivers and 2 tight ends in the draft. Now they traded Aaron Rodgers to do that. And hey, Brett Veach, I mean, kind of take a look what happens, So, yeah.
They also have a legit wide receiver coach there in Green Bay, though.
Yeah, and that's another thing Keas has been adamant about, is bringing David Coley back, which makes a lot of sense.
Or Larry Kirksey. I now that I'm familiar with him, either one of those guys, they're out there, they're not coaching. Larry Kirksey coached Jerry Rice, Terrell Owens, Jimmy Smith, D Hop, and other receivers. That's a pretty hardcore list right there.
Don't get me wrong, I 100% would put Bama over to Noel. So many reasons why that was the best choice, both down dollars. Here's the thing, Denver Gator, is that I know Texas is worth a lot of money, but so is Georgia. And a lot of people say it comes down to money. If it really came down to money, it would be Georgia, Texas, Michigan, and Alabama, and Washington would be on the outside looking in. I don't know if you could really say it comes down to money. I just think the competition committee made a mistake. It just messed up. I still don't get it. I still don't get how Georgia got left out. It doesn't make any damn sense. It doesn't make any sense. And I'll be honest, I'm looking forward to the Georgia-Florida State game, but I'm predicting like a 27-0. Like, it may be 27 to -3. It could be that bad, because I think Florida State has to go with that third string quarterback. So, yeah. And when we disagree 60%, I love this. If you're curious, by the way, and you shouldn't be curious, you should know where this comes from. But Anchorman, such a fantastic movie, one of my all-time favorites. So, Keas, we both agree Jacksonville had the worst weekend. We disagree on whether to sit Trevor Lawrence or not. Great question, Perry. Who had the better weekend, though? The 9-3 Miami Dolphins or the 9-3 Baltimore Ravens?
Yeah, for me, it's the Ravens. What made the Dolphins weekend so great? They played a coaching staff that clearly, to me, hasn't watched tape on their offense all season, because you're playing off zone or off man the whole game against Tyreek Hill. Like, the Chiefs gave you tape on how to play the Dolphins. The Bills gave you tape on how to play the Dolphins. Who's the other team I'm forgetting? Have the Eagles played them? There's another team. I want to say
Bills. I think it was Dolphins. I'm sorry. I think it was the Eagles. I think it was Eagles.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah. I mean, the 3 losses are the only 3 teams Miami's played with a winning record. I mean,
yeah, those 3 teams gave you a blueprint on defense on how to slow down or stop Tyreek Hill, and you just said, "Nah, we're good. We're gonna play off." we're going to give this guy a free release and, just let him carve us up. And I mean, it was shades of the Denver game, right? So in my mind, as I'm watching this and I'm watching this stupidity on defense, like, and then you ask that question, I'm like, well, why the hell would I pick the Dolphins? Like, Washington gave them that game by putting like the dumbest staffer on the coaching staff, probably took some water boy or something and said, hey, you come up with our defensive game plan for this one. So, on the other hand, you're Baltimore. Like I said, the schedule coming up, it is daunting, in my opinion. We're going to find out exactly how legitimate over the next 5 weeks the Ravens are as Super Bowl contender and favorite, just based off of the schedule, because in a couple of weeks, we're going to see one of my potential Super Bowl matchups, which is the 49ers and the Ravens, right? I think it's 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I think it's correct.
That's number one and number two in point differential in the NFL right now. And it's not even close. Like the 49ers are like over 100 plus on point differential, and the Ravens are second with like 45 plus 45. So more than twice the point differential, but like those are the top two teams. And so the Ravens, you got to win. You don't have significant injuries. Like, how is that not a loss? Whereas, the Dolphins were basically gifted a win. This is like week 2 of the college football season when Alabama schedules like Kentucky Mountain Outhouse University second string, and they just stomp them.
Oh, I agree completely. Baltimore, I think they really are going to take advantage of this Week 13 bye, because you have to change things in your offense without Mark Andrews. Odell Beckham has been banged up, pretty much the whole season, so he gets an extra week of rest. I can never remember his name. I remember he's the first-round pick out of Minnesota. I don't know why I can never remember his name.
Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, Rashad Bateman. He's been banged up. You get an extra week of rest for him. You know what? I just forgot I remembered Odell Beckham. I forgot all
Zay Flowers,
and then Nelson
Isaiah Likely.
Yeah, all those guys now get a little healthier, and it's for the stretch run. And you have a really, really good chance for that 1 seed. So there is some advantage, but
and you let Todd Monken, have the time to finally go back and self-scout. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
Exactly. So Baltimore, I think really this is a week. I've always thought that a late season bye is much more advantageous than early season bye. So especially if a team like Baltimore has been banged up, a very veteran team, I think this is perfect. But I agree with Keas. I mean, Miami, Tyreek Hill, in my opinion, is an MVP. I think he's the front runner. If you want to tell me Christian McCaffrey, I'd go for that. A lot of people are saying Dak Prescott should be MVP. We'll find out. They play at home against Philly. We'll see. I think Miami had a better weekend. They're now the number 1 seed. They got to stay healthy. I mean, that's kind of the thing. I'll be honest with you. If you told me that Tua was going to start the first 12 games of the season, I would have said no. I would have said you're wrong. It's not going to work. But he's played every game so far. It's worked out. So kudos to the Dolphins here. Kinsey should look at Burden from Mizzou. It's a little early for draft prospects. My sister and brother-in-law going to. You know what? That would be awesome. I'm actually not familiar with Burden from Missouri. I will say this: like it's so hard to like that university. That MIZZOU chant's one of the most annoying things I've ever seen. I can't stand it. If you're not familiar with it. Every time Missouri gets a first down, one side field yells MIZ, the other one does ZOU. It's super annoying. It's awful. MU fans are the worst. The only thing worse than MU fan is a KU fan. They both suck. They just suck, Denver Gator. But no, I'll check them out, man. Me and you communicate on a pretty regular basis, so make sure you remind me about this Burden kid. I'll check them out. And then, by the way, if you do any Senior Bowl meet and greets or anything, dude, keep me informed. I want to hear what you say. I want to hear if you talking is hard. I want to hear what input you might have. Perry says Alabama is a moneymaker. I think Alabama got bigger fan base or general public interest. General public interest possible. I'm gonna tell you right now though, Georgia would generate so much more money than Washington. I mean, any SEC school would, to be honest with you. Texas is a big money maker. Texas got money to burn. It's crazy amount that they have. But, I thought Alabama winning in, that made sense. I out of all the teams, I thought Georgia was the only one who could lose and get in. So after a Ravens-Chargers game, it's hard to think the Ravens will compete against San Francisco. We'll see what happens. Keas has Keas did his chart of power rankings. I don't know why I couldn't think of to say power ranking. Power rankings chart. Keas, is it possible for you to bring that up?
Yeah, give me a second here.
All right.
But I just want to say to Mark, the Bills will never be the Chiefs because they don't have Patrick Mahomes.
No, but hey, Mark, it's great to see you in the chat. I don't recognize you, so it's good to see you. We do need more Bills fans here. Hopefully, you do not get injured breaking a table. That is, I got some respect for Bills fans. Don't get me wrong, but that table jumping thing is without question one of the dumbest things in all of sports. But Mark, it's great to see you, brother. Great to see you, brother. Yeah, the MIZZOU chant is what the tomahawk chop is to me. I'm looking at you, Florida State. I get that. I cannot. Okay, this is a true story. All right, so I lived in the Midwest for when did I'm showing my age a little bit? I moved here when the Colts moved to Indianapolis. I think that was 85. All right, I had Chiefs season tickets in 89. And I never heard that chant until, I want to say 2004, when MU under Chase Daniel ended up being the number one team in the country for 1 week. And then Oklahoma beat them. It was like 56-10. And it just, if you're a fair weather fan, I despise you with a passion. And there's nothing more fair weather than a Missouri football fan, except for a KU fan. KU is the only fan base where fans proudly say, I like them when they win. And that's the only fan base I've ever heard that from. So I despise KU and I despise MU. I despise fair weather fans. Dude, Patriots fan. That's awesome. You're not going to believe this. Keaton Talk Sports, a Patriots fan. So it's kind of cool. By the way, Mark, I hope you hang out during draft time, and I hope I hear more from you, because I have so many questions of what the Patriots can do, and they're trying so hard to get that number one seed, the number one pick in the draft. Mark has Michigan versus Texas in the national championship. I do think Texas. I'm leaning towards Alabama, but whoever wins between Michigan and Alabama is going to win the whole thing. But Texas, yes. Oh, Keaton Talk Sports. By the way, do check out Keaton Talk Sports. He has a phenomenal channel. He was my guest star host on Friday. And Keys, I'm going to rub it in a little bit. I gave Keaton a much better outline than I gave you. So I'm kind of a dick here. I gave you kind of a shitty outline. I gave Keaton a good one. By the way, you want to hear something crazy? Talk about college football. Keaton Talk Sports is an Ohio State fan. He said Ohio State backups would beat everybody in the college football playoffs. Everybody by 50. So just throwing that out there. Keaton Talk Sports. By the way, Keaton, I hope you will come on again. You're phenomenal. You're phenomenal. So I hope you come on. And this is a great question. With Kenny Pickett out 2 to 4 weeks, will the Steelers miss the playoffs? Keas, I'll have you take this one first here.
That is a great question. I think the biggest question is talent-wise and ability-wise, like how far apart are Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky? I might be more inclined to say yes if I was a big Kenny Pickett fan, but I think he's a solid quarterback. I don't think he's really their answer at quarterback, and that, that's not a slight, because you can be a solid quarterback, like Derek Carr and some other quarterbacks, and still be, in that 10 to 15 quarterback range. So, that's not a slight, but, everybody out there has to realize we've been watching Patrick Mahomes now for going on 6 years. So we're seeing like the top of the top elite quarterback play, in the playoffs. We see Allen, Burrow, we get to see Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, a lot of these guys. And so even Jalen Hurts. So it's different when you're watching these guys constantly, and then you go and you watch someone like Kenny Pickett or Derek Carr. And so again, it's not a slight to him, but I think that offense, the way it's built, will be fine-ish with Trubisky there. So I'm inclined to still think that they make the playoffs. Right now, they're on there as one of my playoff teams, but those potential wild cards could certainly push them. But a lot of those teams are not going to have necessarily easy pathway on paper when you look at their schedule.
It's funny because of the questions, this will be the third one that me and Keas agree upon, and Keas just nailed it. The way the offense is designed, it goes through the running game. It's not, the Steelers are not a team that needs to score 40 points. Great defense. It did bother me that the Cardinals went to Pittsburgh, played in a game that had multiple weather delays. It was terrible weather. And a team from the desert in bad weather conditions beats Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. That should bother me if I was a Steelers fan. Matter of fact, I have a buddy who's a Steelers fan, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say about this. I don't think the Steelers will miss the playoffs. And it's kind of funny because we're going to go over this playoff picture because the AFC is so much fun right now. There's 4 7-5 teams, 3 6-6 teams, 2 5-7 teams. So basically, and by the way, the only team that's eliminated mathematically from playoff contention in the NFL is the Carolina Panthers. Technically, the New England Patriots, and I have no idea how. But the New England Patriots can somehow mathematically still make the playoffs. I don't know how this can happen, but realistically, though, if you're 5-7, and that's the Raiders and the Chargers, you're the Bills, Bengals, or Broncos at 6-6, or you're the 4 7-5 teams, you have a legitimate chance to make the playoffs. I think Pittsburgh's going to be one of those teams. Keaton Talk Sports. And by the way, Keaton, you were amazing, but I do disagree with you that Ohio State would beat half the NFL teams. So Keaton is a big Ohio State fan. So, and by the way, dead serious though, I'm kind of joking around here, but Keaton, he was phenomenal, and I'd love to have you back on. Mark says Eagles will beat the Cowboys. All right. You know what? Here I am. I give Keaton this great outline, and I'm just going to throw a curveball here. at Keas. Eagles Cowboys Sunday Night Football. I think it's game of the week. I did my picks video. I'm looking at your chart, and I'm guessing from the chart I know your answer, but I want to hear what you have to say. Sunday night, let's throw a curveball at you. Mark says Eagles will beat the Cowboys. Do you have an opinion on that game yet?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's Cowboys played them the first game, right? In Philly, right?
Yeah.
Should have won that game. I think it's more clear this game that the Cowboys should definitely win. And, clearly I know what I'm talking about because I have had the 49ers as a Super Bowl favorite now for 2-3 weeks, right? I think ever since the Eagles should have lost to Kansas City, after that game, the 49ers have been the NFC Super Bowl favorite on my tiers, and I got some questioning from people about that. And then the 49ers went out and pretty handedly whooped the Eagles. So
yeah, I have Dallas winning. If you haven't been paying attention, Dallas at home has just been phenomenal this year. I mean, they're not just win. Matter of fact, the game Thursday, 41-35. That was the only close home game that Dallas has had this year, and they still put up 41 points, which is their average. They're averaging 41 points a game. So yeah, Keas, do you have an opinion on this one? Have you watched enough college football to determine if J.J. McCarthy, the University of Michigan quarterback, is a first-round NFL quarterback?
no, I haven't. So I'll just leave it at that. I haven't watched. I don't like Michigan, so and I didn't actually even get to watch the Iowa Michigan game, not because of that, but because I already had date plans. So I completely missed it and had a lovely time supporting a charity event for firemen, EMTs, and the police. And if I can, a really quick funny story here, Dan. It's not even really a story, not really a story, but we're walking out at like 10:30 p.m. and this thing started at 5 p.m. And they're serving all kinds of alcohol there. And right in the lobby, there's a couple of policemen just standing there most of the night. And I kept thinking to myself, oh, this is going to be fun for people. But when we left, they had moved outside in front of the entrance. And so I'm like, okay, well, you can't really be pulling people over, right? Like you can't expect them to come back next year and support you if you arrest, half of your donors here. And there was a guy at the table next to us who was clearly like 2 hours in, completely tanked. But anyway, so we're walking to the car. We walk by the police and there's a group in front of us already walking. And I hear one of the cops go, say something like, yeah, I'm sure they're walking home. And then they all just kind of laughed at it, so like the implication there was, they knew they had some drinking and driving going on, but they weren't going to do anything about it because they said it. And I turned to my wife and we both laughed all the way to our vehicle there. Cause yeah, I'm sure they're walking home.
Hey, they know where the paychecks come from.
Right.
So. Barry, I'm going to answer this here. No, there is a possibility he does get drafted in the first round. I've watched enough of him. That is not first round quarterback. I also said Jordan Love was not even close to a first round quarterback, and I was wrong there. There could be an NFL team that falls in love with him. He's got NFL size plus mobility. I haven't seen anything of him throwing the ball that leads me to believe he's worthy of a first round pick. So the answer for me is a hard no. And this is a good quarterback draft. So he'll be drafted. I just don't think he'll be in the first round. Mark, it's really funny because I had one Pride and Keas on, and Keas, I apologize because I don't know if it was you. I think you said the biggest problem with the Patriots was the skill position speed. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's what I said. I think you said the offensive line. To me, the last couple of years, they just have not had enough. And that's not to say they don't have their other issues, because listen, Mac Jones to me is like, he's not the answer. So even if they had the skill position players, I think you have Daniel Jones last year with skill position players. But I don't think they have enough speed on the offense, and that's like, it kills me, because I root for the Patriots every time they play the Bills. I root for the Patriots every time they play the Dolphins. I believe the two of us picked the Patriots to make the playoffs this year.
I know.
And every game, it's just like, it doesn't matter how good their defense is. Mac Jones isn't it, and the skill position players just do not have the speed to be playmakers.
Yeah, you're right. And so it was one Pride who said quarterback, and I want to be very clear. I'm not sold on Mac Jones. I'd actually like to see some more Bailey Zappi to see if he's a guy, but I think it's offensive line. If the way the draft works right now, if let me double check here, because I'm almost positive if the draft were to go right now. Okay, so and I just verified it. If the draft was today, the Patriots would pick number 2 overall. All right. I have no idea what Chicago is going to do at number 1. They have the Carolina Panthers pick. If Caleb Williams is available, I don't know. I'll be honest with you, Mark. I just don't see Bill Belichick really being sold on Caleb Williams, man. I just don't see it. I think if I'm New England and Caleb Williams is available at 2, I'm trading that pick, and I guarantee you there's going to be a team that's going to call New England and trade an arm and a leg to get Caleb Williams, and I guarantee you Belichick makes that move. So
yeah, I don't think, I'm going to assume for you, Dan, I don't think I want to say with Gooch and me and you, I think we're all kind of the same place, that he doesn't look like he has the mental or emotional makeup to be a leader of a franchise.
No, he doesn't. And by the way, I mean, like, he is so much fun to watch it on a college level, but I can't emphasize this enough. The NFL game and the college game are just so different. They're completely different things. And Perry nailed it. If the Pats draft Williams, that would be a big mistake. They should be trading down. Look at what Chicago got, and I don't even think they used the draft picks correctly. Can you imagine like what New England would do if they got a guy like Jalen Carter and a number 1 wide receiver plus additional draft capital? There's a lot of good quarterbacks in this draft. There's a lot of good quarterbacks. We're going to break down the draft in a lot more detail, Mark, but yeah, I just don't see Bill Belichick pulling the trigger on Caleb Williams. That's just me. JJ from Michigan might be that's where I see him right now today. I want to see what he does at the Senior Bowl, East-West Shrine game, and I want to see what he does at the Combine. I'm thinking like 3rd, 4th round. The kid from TCU, the quarterback, remember he was drafted in the 7th round by the Chargers, and I think he got cut. And there was some talk about him going 3rd, 4th round. McCarthy may free fall in this draft, but right now today, 3rd, 4th round, that sounds about right. Yeah, Perry, I've seen a lot of mocks have him in the 1st round. I don't think he is, and I don't think he will. So
I will root for every quarterback available to go in the 1st round. I'll root for it. I'm all for it. Draft 20 quarterbacks. That's going to mean someone great is going to fall to Kansas City. So
Perry says, I think the Philly and the Lions should be reversed. Well, you know what? Let's dive into this, because we've been reading these comments. And by the way, keep the comments coming. These are fantastic. Let's go over Keas' chart. The number 1 pick contention is the Panthers and the Patriots. The Panthers, of course, gave up their number 1 pick to the Chicago Bears. As of right now, the Bears will pick number 1 and number 4 in the draft. It's going to be a lot of fun for Jim Harbaugh when he takes that Chicago Bears job and leaves Michigan. So that's another story for another day. Missing playoff teams. I'm gonna skip that section because I'm gonna look at these toss-up teams, and I think these are great. And this is phenomenal. The one thing I do want to point out is you do got a couple teams in the Chargers and the Saints that you have missing the playoffs. When you have missing the playoffs, like percentage wise, and or how likely would one of these teams because I had the Saints winning the South, and the Saints are still in the South contention. Me and you both agreed Chargers got a ton of talent. You got them at 22 and 23, so right on the cusp of some play. What would those teams need to do? Is there a possibility, or better yet, is there a possibility that one of those teams can make the playoffs?
And again, part of it is their schedule remaining. But part of it is the schedule of the teams that, are 1, 2, 3 games ahead of them. And that's kind of where, when I was looking at this, I kind of, went where I went with it. Like, I understand believing in the Saints. That you could say they're going to win 3 more games, right? If you want to say that. If you wanted to say they're going to win 4 more games, that I could potentially buy it. I just think it's going to be, harder. I don't think that the Falcons are going to give up their divisional spot. Let's see, looking at their remaining schedule, right? The Falcons have the Bucks, the Panthers, the Colts, the Bears, and then the Saints, right? So those 2 teams are going to play each other. That could be, it could be the deciding factor for the division there. But, to me, yeah, I know the Falcons and Bucks is going to be a hard game. Falcons and Panthers should not be. Neither should the Bears. The Colts could be harder than expected, but in the grand scheme of things, the Bucks are 5-7, the Saints are 5-7. The Falcons got that extra game there, and to me, it's a little bit bigger when you look at everyone's schedule. Kind of the same thing with the Chargers. I just think their path is much harder, and you have more teams that I think have on paper have an easier path.
No, I see it too. I still have the Saints winning that division, but we both agree that the Chargers have a world of talent. Are you writing them out of the playoffs completely, or let me ask you this: is it like what 20%, 40%? Is it subject week to week? How hardcore do you have them as a missing playoff team?
Are they going to fire Brandon Staley during the season? If they fire Staley during the season, then I would say they might have a 20-25% chance of making the playoffs.
If Brandon Staley is fired, do you move them automatically up to a toss-up team?
Sure, we'll say
all
that.
Right, I like that. That's kind of what I was thinking too. With Staley, they missed the playoffs, but
I would probably move them after the Bengals. If they fired Staley, I would probably.
And Keas, I think, is locked up here. He's having some technical difficulty. The Lions lost to the Packers, barely beat the Bears. Hey, Keas, you froze up for about 10 seconds. So.
Okay. I said I would move the Chargers up to where the Vikings were.
Okay.
19. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to say, Perry, I don't want to speak for Keas, but I do know this is that for his preseason prediction, he had the Lions as the NFC Super Bowl representative. That might go into it, but We'll get there. We're going to go bottom to top. If you're not a Pats fan or a diehard NFL fan, it's hard to name playmakers in New England. By the way, the only playmaker I just forgot his name. The running back, he had high ankle sprain early. And
which one are we talking about? Ramondre Stevenson.
You're Ramondre Stevenson. He got hurt. So do you think McDaniels ends up back in New England? I do. I 100% think he goes back to New England. It wouldn't surprise me if he's back there by late January, early February. Keas, you have an opinion. Does McDaniels end up in New England or anywhere else in the NFL?
I mean, I think that I think he should just move on to a lower tier team. But I mean, there's a good chance. Coaching staffs generally like that. It's who can you trust, and I'm sure Bill has a lot of trust in him. But going back to the weapon, I'll say this: I liked Tyquan Thornton as kind of a Christian Watson light coming out of the draft. So I'm still a little bit higher on him, but that offense overall, like the receivers, like I'm not seeing, the kind of explosion that I'd like to see for them to get yards after catch, which I think is imperative in today's NFL, the way defenses are playing.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy. It was about 40. I think it was 2 years ago. They drafted Tyquan Thornton, who had the fastest 40 time in the draft. They got a running back. I think it was Pierre Strong, who's gone now, but he was it was tied for the fastest 40 time. And they drafted a couple corners. One of them they just released and signed with I think the Raiders who released Marcus Peters. So what they did is they tried to draft speed and just really didn't turn out. But that Tyquan Thornton, I thought would need some time to develop. I might be wrong, but at the time, I really liked Sky Moore better. Of course, I was a lot higher on Sky Moore than. Well, he needs to step up. I'm going to get all mad thinking about Sky Moore right now. Perry says if the Chargers fired Staley right now, Moore takes over for us. Exactly. And I think with Kellen Moore, they become a threat to be a possible playoff team. But they're one of those 5 and 7 teams that, believe it or not, are still in the hunt for the playoffs. Denver Gator says first year for a 1 and 16 team and a 7 and 10 division winner. I think the Saints win it at 8 and 9. I really do. I think Saints win it at 8 and 9. I really, really believe that. I really, really believe that. Perry hates your Lions pick, but we're going to go from bottom to top because I want to touch base on these toss-up teams and go into the wild card matchups. But Perry, I'm 100% not ignoring you. We're going to talk about – Keas is going to go into detail why the Lions are the third best team in the NFL. We're ready for you, but we're just going to go from bottom to top. So I seriously believe Staley would have been fired even after I predicted the Patriots would win and then fire him. I put this in my video, but how the fuck does a NFL game in 2023 end in 6-0? I mean, how did that in 2023? That should never happen. Denver Gator, man, it's good to see you, brother. Denver Gator's always good to see you, brother. So, man, I'm glad you popped in. I want to go to the toss-up team, and you threw me off. I want to go up to the toss-up teams because these are really good teams, and I'll start off with the Bengals. Would they be missing the playoffs if they didn't beat Jacksonville?
Yeah, unless I saw them have a similar performance over the last few games that they played, probably so. Like last week, they were my 22nd. Yeah, they were my 22nd team, and then they're missing the playoffs. And so, I think I saw enough, even though, I still think they lose if Trevor Lawrence doesn't get injured and Beathard's not out there. But I still saw enough to where, they look like, of course they miss Joe Burrow, but they don't look like they miss Joe Burrow the way I or other people might have expected, or the way that other teams would be missing their starting quarterback. Like if the Chiefs lost Mahomes, even if Chad Henne was back, like Chad Henne, Blaine Gabbert, take your pick, there's going to be a huge drop off. And even more so this year, if the Chargers don't have Justin Herbert, there's going to be that drop off. If the Eagles don't have Jalen Hurts, there's going to be that drop off. And maybe the Ravens are the closest equivalent here, because when Lamar missed time last year, Huntley was a pretty, still looked pretty good in his absence. But, that's probably a good comparison for me. But I think that's a lot of it is it showed you that as good as Bro is, he's not like the essential piece of that team. And maybe some of us, like me, wrote them off a little too early. That remains to be seen.
It was really impressive, but I said this, and I'm going to stand by it. I think without Burrow, I think that team's done. I think Jacksonville just laid an egg. AFC is just too tough, and I think the Bengals are going to stay on the outside in, but that win was impressive. They ran. This was the team that had like the worst rushing offense in the NFL, and then they just exploded against Jacksonville for some massive plays. Jamar Chase showed why at times he can take over a game just by himself. I mean, what a dominant wide receiver. So Denver Gator, what team can cover 4.5 and only score 6? I know. It is just so goofy. It is so goofy. Perry asked a great question. What do you think is the biggest weakness on the Bengals? Is it missing Burrow or is it something else? Now, Keas called Burrow a system quarterback, and that's all he is. So Keas, man, what's your opinion on Perry's question here?
For me, that's going to be incomplete because, we're now, we're on to week 14. Mm-hmm. And so kind of where I was a week or two ago with the Chiefs is kind of where I'm at with this team, which is why they're a toss-up team and not a missing the playoff teams or a potential wild card, because I'm still going to need to see some things the next week or two. We know that Lou Anarumo is a fantastic defensive coordinator. I know we agree on that. We know that losing Jesse Bates was just a huge loss for that defense. We also know that sometimes it takes a while for a defensive coordinator and a defensive unit to gel and figure out how to overcome a loss like that. And so it's kind of a question, is that defense going to be trending up as the season ends? Because if it is, and the wide receiver group, continues to be what it is, and they get that kind of decent quarterback play, really it comes down to what it's been for the last few years now, the offensive line. Like, it's the offensive line. It has been, it will be the offensive line. If you give a quarterback enough time, especially with those weapons, like, they're going to look great. Jordan Love without his offensive line, or before that offensive line, they've gotten better every single week. But before that point, was Jordan Love looking as good as he looked Sunday night? So I think that's the big thing. It's still the offensive line, which is what it has been.
Barry, I really think it's going to. I really think it's going to come down to Joe Burrow. Now, Keas is adamant that he's only a system quarterback. I look. I'm going to tell you something. I've seen backup quarterbacks come in and look great, and then they come back down to earth, and I think that's what you're going to see. The one thing is that I don't think they're a playoff team, but one thing that Keys pointed out is that they lost both their safeties. Von Bell was a key part of that secondary with Bates, and right now they got Dax Hill, second-year player, former first-round pick. I think it's second-year player, maybe it's third year. I think it's second. And they got a rookie third-round pick, a guy I absolutely loved. Gooch probably doesn't care for him all that much. He went to that school down south there. I can't think of the name of it. They're into college football. He's an Auburn Tiger, so Gooch doesn't like but he's third-round pick. Now, the good news is that he played in an NFL type of defense in college, but college in the NFL. So, I mean, there's talent there in that secondary, and there's talent all over that defense. I was kind of surprised they gave up as many points. But for me, it's Burrow. That's basically it. When they get Burrow back. Now, here's another thing, Perry, is that next year you have a whole new situation because you're going to lose probably T. Higgins, maybe Tyler Boyd. There's some defensive starters you're going to lose. You should lose Lou Anarumo.
Let me ask you this though, Dan. Why is Burrow gone? What happened?
Well, I mean, he was injured, and
how did he get injured?
He got hit, and I get where you're going with the offensive line. I think the offensive line will also need to be addressed. The one thing that they brought up on Monday Night Football, and they kept on bringing it up, is that they've had the same starting of five, and I still think they need to improve the offensive line. But you're gonna have defections. You're going to lose your defensive coordinator, probably lose your defensive coordinator. I mean, I would be shocked if he got passed up. I really, really would be shocked. But we've seen weird things in coaching hires. So, yeah. But the problem this year is Burrow. Next year, it's going to be a whole new thing. This is Burrow's fifth year in the NFL. It's his third year that he hasn't finished the season, and there is some problems with the offensive line. Don't get me wrong, but this season, for me, the bigger issue is Burrow. One thing that's interesting about I'm going to go back to the toss-up teams. You have Vikings, Colts, and Raiders. If the playoffs were to start today, the Vikings would own the 6th seed, and the Colts would own the 7th seed. I'm looking at your power rankings. I can do a little bit of math. Which one of these toss-up teams, Vikings or the Colts, is more likely to make the playoffs?
I kind of want to say the Colts based off of, if you're making me pick between the two teams, I'm going to go with the Colts just because of the Vikings schedule. You know, I think the Raiders is going to be a tough game for them. You know, if you believe in the Bengals moving forward, that's going to be a tough game for them. They play the Lions twice, you know, my NFC Super Bowl pick preseason, and they play the Packers. So I'm looking at that schedule, and I think it's realistic to say that they could go 0-5 in that stretch. At best, I see them going 2-3 during that stretch for the Vikings.
Yeah, I was kind of leaning the same direction here. Earlier in the season, when it looked like the Lions were going to run away with that division, I was thinking maybe that final game of the season they may be resting starters. Now I'm looking at the way things are going, and the Lions may need to go all in the last couple games of the season, and they may need to sweep the Vikings. I like the Colts a lot. There's a lot of things I really like about the Colts, but I'm looking at the rest of those teams that you have in the AFC. If the playoffs were to start today, the Colts are the 7th seed, but I have to agree with you. that on your power rankings, and I want you to go into a little more detail. Cleveland, which is also 7-5. Now Pittsburgh is a playoff team according to Keas, but I'm looking at the Broncos, the Browns, and what was the other team? The Houston Texans, and those teams all look better to me as well. But I have to admit that the Colts are a team that nobody's talking about, but when Jonathan Taylor comes back in a week or two, they have this dynamic weapon. They also got some big physical playmakers at receiver. They can get after the quarterback with just 4, and they got decent defense. They're a team that I think a lot of people are sleeping on, but I'm looking at the rest of the teams in the AFC, and I agree with you, Keas, that the Colts are probably on the outside looking in. One of the things I really like for potential wild cards is that you have 12 playoff teams, and there's a spot in the AFC and there's a spot in the NFC. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it looks like you have the number 7 seed going to the Rams and Texans. Is that how you see this season kind of playing out?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it looks to me. And going back, I really tried to look more at this, the rest of the schedule. And I'm not saying I didn't miss any here, but trying to look at the rest of the schedule and kind of mix between that and, head coach, quarterback combo, overall team, which is why, like the Vikings last week, they were my 11th ranked team. They were a playoff team. But like I said, that, looking at their schedule, their remaining schedule, 0-5 seriously looks like a possibility, and 2-3 looks like maybe a optimistic, realistic view there. Kind of looking at the Rams, the same way. Looking at the Seahawks, I had Vikings, I think 6, and Seahawks at 7. Looking at the schedule, the rest of the way out. Kind of drop those two teams down farther. It just looks like the Rams have the easiest path in the NFC right now. Not even necessarily the best team of the remaining teams, but the easiest path to getting that 7th playoff spot in the NFC. The AFC, it's a little bit more of a toss-up. You could see the Steelers drop out. And see the Texans or the Browns jump back in there. The Browns could have just as easily been in there, but again, it's kind of juggling the remaining schedules and looking at the quarterbacks and who the head coaches are. And so, yeah, I think it's fair to say, but realistically, I think between the Texans and Browns, and maybe depending on what the Bengals look like over the next 2 or 3 weeks, compared to how the Broncos look, right? They had a chance to jump up as well, but they stayed there at 16. The Bengals could jump right up there with the Rams. I mean, I don't know at this point, but some of these teams, if they get up there or they get in, they're going to earn it because of their remaining schedules.
Yeah, I agree completely with you when it comes to the Rams. The schedule is very favorable, and they're getting healthy and hot at the right time. The job they did against Cleveland's defense was really, really good. And you have a unit with Aaron Donald, and you have a really good coaching staff. So, I mean, the Rams probably have the easiest path. Are you completely sold on the Houston Texans? Now, you put down potential, but you got them at 14. Because this AFC playoff picture is looking like a lot of fun. I personally thought that beating Denver and ending that horrible 5-game winning streak that nobody wanted to see really elevated Houston in my eyes. Will Anderson was the definition of game wrecker. If you didn't see the game, he had 2 sacks, a batted pass. I think he forced a fumble. he looked like the guy that we saw out of that team. And God, I forget what it is. It's in the South. I don't know. Is it Auburn? Yeah, he probably played at Auburn. Gooch, if Gooch was here, he'd know. Huge Auburn fan. So it might. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but did Houston with the victory over Denver make them a playoff team? You got potential.
You know, in some way, they are similar to me as Jacksonville, which is going to sound weird since Jacksonville was 8, and then you have the Trevor Lawrence news there. But you know, part of that is it's more about how many wins Jacksonville already has, right? With in addition to remaining schedules for the various teams. But I think the biggest thing to me is, you know, I look at the Texans' remaining schedule, but I also look at like their last 5 games, right? We got a 2-point loss to the worst team in the NFL in the Panthers. We have a 2-point win over the Bucks, who I don't see as a playoff team. You have a 3-point win over the Bengals. You have only, and I get it, only, right? Because the Cardinals beat the Steelers, but only a 5-point win at home against the Cardinals. And you lose by 3 to the Jaguars, who are so up and down with their whole season. You know, as you kind of alluded to already, you know, they have some very head-scratching losses to teams they shouldn't. And so, you know, I could just as easily, if the Jags didn't have the schedule or the record they already have, and maybe I could bump them down. But realistically, of the teams on there, you know, at this point, only Green Bay, from what I've seen, would be the team that I could, you know, bump there. And I'm not ready to do that yet. I still got to watch them in another game or two. But, you know, I mean, I think the Titans are going to battle them hard. You know, the Jets, the problem with the Jets is if they, you know, they're the Patriots, but worse in that if they had any semblance of a living, breathing quarterback, they would be winning these games because their defense is just so dang good. You know, and it's like, I could see that one being a hard game too. For all the pomp and circumstance, you know, for CJ Stroud. And I know some people out there hate analytics, but, you know, like, he's had a decent chunk of turnover worthy plays for whatever that's worth. And I know for you, Dan, it's not worth much, but still, you know, I think Texans, Titans, Mike Vrabel will always have his group ready to fight. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but they're going to be ready to fight. And it's always a very physical game. You know, then you play the Browns. You know, you could easily lose that one. You got to play the Titans again. And you were just talking about the Colts to end the season.
That's going to, that could very easily be a win and end game. And kudos to the NFL. If you look at the last week of the season, I'm looking at it. I mean, I don't want to go there yet, because I mean, you know, I want to dive through this. But if you go through the schedule, you go to week 18. There looks like there could be about 4 games that are winning in. I mean, it really does look like that. It really does. Perry asked, do you think the Falcons will make the playoffs? That's the next part on Keas' list, is playoff teams, where he has Jacksonville, Green Bay, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Atlanta. So and Keas kind of touched base on this a little bit. He thinks Atlanta does make the playoffs. And I do want to ask Keas this question. I think if Falcons had solid quarterback play, they would make the playoffs. If the Falcons had a good quarterback, Keas, how good would this Falcons team be? And also, I know I can see the chart, but can you elaborate on Perry's question? Do you think the Falcons make the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I think they would be a pretty good playoff team if they had a legit quarterback. I would probably. I mean, it's hard to bump. Clearly, they would be ahead of the Steelers. I don't know that I could bump them up much farther than that. If you look at the Jags with Trevor Lawrence, without Trevor Lawrence, yeah, they could leapfrog the Jags. Depending on what the Bills look like the next couple of weeks, it's just hard to have them leapfrog the Bills because the Bills still have that playoff pedigree, and the way Green Bay's looked, yeah, like I wouldn't put them ahead of any of those teams except for the Steelers, and if the Jags are without Trevor Lawrence, I could see them being ahead of those two teams if they had a legit quarterback. I couldn't put them in ahead of any of the other teams that I have listed on there, though. So up to like 10, 9 or 10 maybe.
All right. Yeah, I will say this, Perry. If the Falcons had a top 10 quarterback, even in bottom 10, let's throw it out there because we got a lot of Lions fans in the chat. Jared Goff. I would put them winning the division, but I don't think I'd have them, I wouldn't consider them really a contender. But that's one thing about Atlanta. It's almost worse for them to win the division and go to the playoffs, because if they finish with an 8-9 record and don't make the playoffs, they're in a lot better situation to get a quarterback in the draft, a guy that they want, because you're looking at picking maybe 10 to 12 versus if you make the playoffs, you're picking you're probably picking 18th. I'd have to look through the draft, but winning the division, because you're probably going to play either Dallas or Philly, you're not winning that playoff game, even though you're hosting it. So, and it really looks like no matter what, Atlanta needs to make a change at quarterback. Perry asked another great question. Perry, you're on fire today, brother. The over-under of the Browns move on from their head coach. Keas, percentage thoughts, or just yes or no? Do the Browns move on from their head coach? Now, if they make the playoffs, there's a 0% chance that, well, let's not say zero. If the Browns make the playoffs, Stefanski's probably going to stay. I would put the percentage at 10% or less. But if he doesn't make the playoffs, Keas, if the Browns don't make the playoffs, odds Stefanski is fired.
I almost want to say it does, like making the playoffs. Not making the playoffs isn't like the deciding factor, right? I think it will be one. But I think it'll be one of two. I think the other one will be who else is available, right? Like if somebody else is available, then I think the question becomes, and maybe even then it doesn't matter. But, say you have Brian Dable leave. Would you want to bring him in with Deshaun and that offense? If you're a big fan of Jim Harbaugh, do you go after him? It's kind of a question of who's available, I think, or, who they might like. And you could throw out Ben Johnson if you want to as well. Because I think most people are pretty good with the defense, right?
No, yeah, I am. So you don't think it matters if they make the playoffs or not? It's more of a question of who would be a suitable replacement. Does this mean that you think there is a possibility that Cleveland's looking to move on from their head coach?
I mean, at this point, I kind of would be. I don't think your defense is really what's holding you back at this point. They're my 15th ranked team. Some of that, again, is based on, the way the rest of the season goes. And I mean, I guess you could argue, that it's going to be hard for you could argue that it could it could be hard for anyone being stuck with Deshaun Watson, but I think there's some guys out there who would put Deshaun in a position to succeed again.
Yeah, that's a great response because mine's a little different. I think it's if the Browns make the playoffs, I think there's almost no chance that Stefanski loses his job because you had used multiple quarterbacks during the season. So if you make the playoffs with 4 different starting quarterbacks, I think you're safe. If you don't make the playoffs, I would put it at about 30%. And I think a lot of it has to do with who would be available out there. Because I think Stefanski's offense doesn't fit what Deshaun Watson wants to do. I think it fits what the Browns were built around at the beginning of the season. And that's Nick Chubb, a good offensive line, enough weapons in the quarterback so you don't put 7 in the box, and a really, really good defense. So I think it's more prevalent. And keep in mind, listen, there's a team every year that fires their head coach, and you're like, hey, I didn't see that coming. And I think the Browns could be that team, but I think it drops significantly if they make the playoffs. And me and Keas, we both see them as potential wild cards. I didn't have time to do one of these myself. I wanted to go over Keas and tell him which things he got wrong, and that was all.
Yeah, and I don't think we're really far apart in that answer.
No,
what I'm saying is like I think, for instance, say Bill Belichick does get fired, but he wants to keep coaching. If he's willing to come to Cleveland, even if the Browns make the playoffs, do they say, well, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. He's willing to come here. He's available. We got to pull the trigger type of thing. It's kind of like who ends up available. Like there could be a surprise. You talk about, there being a surprise firing. I'm thinking more of a surprise guy available to where you're like, we kind of have to do this type of move, Andy's not getting fired, but if it's like if one of these or something maybe a little bit more realistic, if Mike Vrabel were to for some reason to get fired from the Titans, right? Would you see that as an upgrade to go from Stefanski to Vrabel? I would. If he was available, to me, it wouldn't matter if you make the playoffs. I'm moving on and bringing him in. If he's willing to come to my team and sign a contract, then I'm packing Kevin Stefanski's bags for him. Otherwise, you make the playoffs, I don't think you get fired at all. It would be one of these like very limited, circumstances to where I would consider it.
Yeah, because the one thing that looks obvious to me when I watch the Browns when they had Deshaun Watson is that the offense that they're running and what Watson does well does not mesh at all. But the offense that Cleveland wants to run with somebody like DTR does, and I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson will get the start. That's not confirmed, by the way. That's just my opinion, and that's going to be. We're going to have to see what happens from there. But Perry, that was a great question. And by the way, like Vrabel, Belichick, those would be great names. Ben Johnson, I think Ben Johnson, I think that would be a lot of fun. The weapons I'm looking at Cleveland with a really great defense. Just imagine what he could do there. Perry has another phenomenal question. Do you think Lamar can play well in the playoffs? Keas, what are your thoughts on this one?
I know that having seen Lamar and the Ravens in the playoffs, the times they've been there, I know that Greg Roman played a decent hand in their losses. And it's kind of hard because there was the playoff berth, and I think it was Ed Reed, went and talked to Lamar and basically told him, hey, you need to protect your body. And Lamar was very timid afterwards, not really willing to take contact, and they lost. But he's got his huge contract now. You have Todd Monken, and, his quarterback biological clock is ticking. And in the AFC like this, this is a prime opportunity, right? You're not always going to get a season where the Chiefs look vulnerable, the Bills and Bengals look beyond vulnerable. Like, this is your best, maybe the best opportunity of his career, maybe the best opportunity the Dolphins will have, while Tua and Tyreek is there. So, if I'm a Ravens fan, I'm hoping so. I'm not from Missouri, but I still have a lot of show me in my blood. So I can't say definitively that he will, because we haven't seen it. You can make a reasoned argument for it. Like I said, he doesn't have Greg Roman now. He has his contract, so he doesn't necessarily have to worry about the security, and his biological clock is ticking. Any 90s people out there for that reference. But, so I think if he doesn't, it'll be very disappointing, for future seasons. And that's going to be a huge cloud over his head, because to me, this is their best chance. You don't have the Greg Roman excuse anymore. You got your financial security, you got to show up in the playoffs, and you got to play well in the playoffs. And he's got the weapons. He's got Odell. He's got the guys out there. So to me, there's no excuse if he doesn't.
I think Keas nailed it perfectly. I really don't have too much to add. I mean, this late season bye is perfect because you get Odell Beckham healthy. You get an opportunity with, Zay Flowers, Nelson Aguilar. I forgot his name again, the kid out of Minnesota. Rashad Bateman. He's healthy. Yeah, you lose Mark Andrews, and that's a massive blow. When they first lost Mark Andrews, I'm thinking it's done, but you got 4 pretty good wide receivers there. And then I forgot, was it Lively? Actually, by the way,
Likely.
Likely. He actually played receiver at Coastal Carolina. It's just that he was 240 pounds. So, Baltimore's like, look, we're going to call you a tight end, but, you're going to catch a lot of passes. You have to block some, but, he's talented. He's got a world of talent. So there is no excuse. You had to buy at the perfect time. So, I mean, there's every other team in the AFC right now looks really vulnerable. So, can he do it? There's no excuse. I mean, if he doesn't do it, I mean, Odell Beckham's not coming back. Is Clowney also on a 1-year deal? I think he is. I don't think he's coming back. Patrick Queen's going to be a free agent. I mean, you're going to lose some players. I kind of agree with everything Keith said.
1-year contract.
Yeah. We kind of talked about this one already, but because you had some great questions here, Perry, so I wanted to make sure I get all of them. Do you think the Patriots should blow it up and rebuild? Keys, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, if you blow up and rebuild, I don't think you do it with Bill Belichick. As hard as that is to say. Because in a way, it's like, what have you been doing since Brady left? Right. And so, it's kind of one of those things where people keep talking about how, all of Bill Belichick's greatness is tied to Tom Brady. And I still think it's closer, to 50-50 there, because Brady went to a very loaded Buccaneers team, and people just seem to forget that Tom Brady didn't go to, one of these toss-up teams or worse and bring them into a contender. They had a lot of pieces, and they had an excellent draft and an excellent free agency that included bringing in Tom Brady. So like he was there with all these pieces, and Bruce Arians went to a Super Bowl with the Cardinals, right? So, Bruce Arians was offensive coordinator with the Colts, right? So it's like, or was he head coach there?
He was the offensive coordinator
back when Andrew Luck, right?
Yeah, Pagano got. Remember, he had cancer, right. And Arians had to take over as the head coach, and what a great job they did.
But it's still, Belichick, kind of similar to Andy Reid, doesn't really have a great track record of drafting wide receivers. Outside of Brady, they don't necessarily have the greatest track record of drafting quarterbacks. You could point to Garoppolo, and so to me, if you blow it up and rebuild, you do it with a different head coach. I'm not sure that the head coach that you do it with, though, is out there and available right now. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard some weird stuff about sometimes when there's smoke, there's fire. And I heard that the Patriots are really interested in Vrabel to replace Belichick. And that would make a lot of sense. Of course, you may have to do something with Tennessee. Yeah, I agree completely. If Belichick stays and the Patriots pick in the top 5, I kind of want to see that, because we had when we had One Pride on, me, Keas, and One Pride all had 3 different answers to what the number one thing the Patriots should do, and all 3 of those things you could do with the top 5 pick. With the top 5 pick, you could take a quarterback, you could take a wide receiver, you could take an offensive lineman, and there's going to be that player available. I think it'd be a lot of fun, personally. I was thinking, if the Patriots, it's hard to there's no way I can picture the Patriots being 2-10, which is what they are. But I kind of want to see it. I just want to see like one more year. I really want to see Belichick with this top 5 pick more, because I love the draft so much. I want to see what he does with the draft. Blow it up only if Belichick's gone. So this is a good one. I don't think Ben Johnson's ready for a head coaching job this year. He's been hot and cold. Keas, what are your thoughts? Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't think that really matters. It shouldn't matter, right? It should be more about his ability to communicate, coach, his understanding of strategy and game management, right? Ideally for me, especially if you have a guy who's going to be a first-time head coach like that, you're bringing in an offensive coordinator. So, we're talking about what? Probably the Lions quarterbacks coach.
That would be Mark Brunell. I don't know if you remember Mark Brunell, but
right, yeah, Jags.
Oh, yeah, loved Mark Brunell.
He's a lefty, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so you bring in probably Mark Brunell to be your offensive coordinator, and the two of you collaborate on that part of it. But I mean, that, the other thing is name a offensive play caller that people haven't said looks hot and cold this year. Like it's every single one of them, whether it's established head coaches like Andy Reid, Sean Payton, like take your pick. It's even Mike McDaniels, people could say that for every single offensive coordinator or head coach who's calling plays. And part of that is because of, offense is down this year. Defenses are figuring things out. They are taking a lot away. And so, there is no simple week-to-week dominance unless, you're basically the 49ers. But, even then, the Eagles have 2 losses. The 49ers still have 3 losses. And, I'm sure their fan bases have both complained, about the play calling being hot or cold, this week to that week.
You brought up something I didn't even think about, but Mark Brunell is the quarterback's coach. There's a very good chance Ben Johnson would take him and have him be the offensive coordinator. And and Keas brought up that Mark Brunell is a lefty. What Keas may or may not remember is Mark Brunell went to the University of Washington. And the University of Washington's quarterback is also a lefty. I'm just going to throw it out there. There's some things, there's that I'm just saying that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it would be a lot of fun too. And by the way, whether you like Michael Penix Jr. or not, if you watch him play at all, the ball just jumps out of his hand. I mean, there's some obvious arm talent there. So if you're Mark Brunell, there might be a guy that you really like in the draft. And if you're going to be a future offensive coordinator, usually a new coaching staff doesn't take over a team with an established quarterback. So those are some good points. I'd be curious how he interviews too, because the rumor was Eric Bieniemy, who was a longtime Chiefs offensive coordinator, interviews terribly. So let's see. Perry says the Bills window has closed. I think you said can. I know you said can, but I think you mean can't. I don't think they're going to beat Kansas City. And the last game of the season's in Miami. Buffalo is going to be a very interesting team because I don't think I disagree with Keas, and I'm going to read your comments, and I want to have Keas talk about it because I do disagree with Keas. I don't think the Bills are a playoff team. Are they the 10th best team in the NFL? Maybe. Are they 10? They're probably a 10th most talented team, or at least top 10. Okay, let me try again. They're a top 10 talented team, but I disagree with Keas that they are not a playoff team. But let's do this here. Let's move on to the playoff teams where we have Jacksonville, we have Green Bay, we have Buffalo, we have Pittsburgh, and we have the Falcons. And let's go with Perry's comment here that I agree. I think the Bills window is closed. You have them making the playoffs. And
sorry, I'm muted. But yeah, if you want me to answer, why, it's kind of similar to our Saints and Falcons argument. Which, I think the biggest thing is, go back and look at the Saints schedule. And I think at best you see a 3-2 record. Do you see the Saints being 4-1 or better with their remaining schedule?
I really do. I think Saints are going to win this division at 8-9.
I mean, so at 8-9 though, they would be only winning 2 out of 5. Right?
3-2.
3-2. So, they're playing the Rams, who I think are the 7th best team there. I think you can give them the Panthers and Giants fairly easily, but then the Saints have to play both the Bucs and Falcons. Right? So I don't see them winning more than 3 out of those 5 games. And the problem is at 8-9, if you look at the Falcons schedule, they play the Panthers and the Bears, right? So they should at least be 2-3, which puts them at 8-9. They have the tiebreaker over the Saints. So if both teams end up 8-9, the Falcons are in and the Saints are out. So the Saints have to go at least 4-1.
They do play the Falcons the last game of the season.
It won't matter for the tiebreaker, though.
Okay. All right.
So if both teams end up 8-9, regardless of that game, the Saints are out and the Falcons are in, which is one of the reasons that I kept the Falcons where I had them. But I'm getting distracted here. The Bills, I know we're probably going to disagree on this, but for me, I think Cowboys is a loss easily, right? Dolphins I have as a loss easily for the Bills, right? That's 2 losses right there. I think the Chargers are beatable for the Bills unless they fire Brandon Staley before then. And again, as much as I hate it, I think the Patriots are an easy win for the Bills as well. So that puts you at 2-2, and so The Bills are 6-6. That puts them at 8-8. And it comes down to the Kansas City game. And here's kind of my justification for that. The Bills defense where it's at right now, I think Kansas City struggles on offense, makes that game a little bit easier for the Bills defense. Like if Kansas City finally figures it out this week, it's a completely different story. But between Josh Allen's running ability, the running ability that we've seen in spurts from, James Cook, and, Stephon Diggs is still Stephon Diggs, and Spags can take away Stephon Diggs. He's shown he can take away a number one, right? And make a Gabe Davis or, one of the other guys beat you. But I think the biggest thing for this week, though, is I'm assuming you're not going to have Drew Tranquill with the concussion. Brian Cook being out the rest of the regular season likely is a huge loss. And so Jack Cochran is your starting Mike, or, what is Willie Gay going to be the Mike?
I was really thinking it was going to be Leo Chenal. Now there is a possibility Nick Bolton will come back.
He could be back for this, but I think it comes down to, I look at, you're going to have to be able to contain Josh Allen. We haven't seen that from this defense yet this season, right? They let Russell Wilson get every look he wanted to take off. Even I'm trying to think back through the games, but that's kind of a weakness with this defense. And if they can get James Cook going, that makes it a lot harder. So and the Bills always play us. They always beat us in the regular season just to lose to us in the playoffs. So this Bills team's a little different, granted. It really depends on how big of a wake-up call this is for our coaching staff. And I'll leave it at that because I know we're going to get to this more when we get to the rest of these tiers here.
Okay. Well, I think it was okay. So let's do this here because you do have the Bills as a playoff team, though.
I think you have to, based off of, well, you don't have to, but I think that they can be 3-2, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think that's unrealistic to say. I think there's a decent chance of 3-2. I think they're definitely going to lose at least 2. It's just a question of, do they lose 2 or do they lose 3? But ultimately, you still have Josh Allen, who, even with the turnovers, and all the craziness with the season, Sean McDermott and Josh Allen are still a combination who made the playoffs, each year. So it's hard for me to completely take them off the board at this point.
Yeah, there's so much talent on that team. So, I get what you're saying. I don't have them winning against the Chiefs, which would put them at 6-7. And I think there is going to be a 10-7 team that's on the outside looking in the AFC. So I disagree there. But I want to point out the one thing that stands out is you have Jacksonville at 8. So despite of the Monday night loss, you are I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I want you to elaborate here. You're looking at that Monday night loss as just a hiccup, but this is a good enough team to win the South and maybe make some noise in the playoffs because you have them at number 8.
Yeah, and again, I think I've said this a few times. Part of that is because they already have 8 wins, right? That's simply part of it. They already have 8 wins, but part of it is I'm not 100% on the Browns yet. I think they lose to the Ravens. I think that's probably an easy one for most people to call. They have the Panthers on there. I think they can still win that game. I'm not even sure at this point that the Panthers want to win. I mean, it doesn't really matter either way.
Well, that first pick in the second round, it doesn't sound like much, but
right.
I've said this over the years. Picks 33 through 39, I call them the gold picks, and especially in a draft where you have all these quarterbacks, you got your quarterback in Bryce Young. You're going to get a really good football player between 33 and 39. And you, even though you don't have a third round pick, that also goes to Houston. Or I'm sorry, no, wait a minute. I got my draft mixed up here. I actually, let me double check here because I think I'm just making stuff up at random here. No, they have a pick in the third round. You can trade back into the first round if you want to, but pick number 33, that's a good draft pick.
Yeah, you could trade up to 32 with Kansas City and get that.
Yeah, I would love that, but I mean, you can still get some good picks.
But yeah, the last two games on there, they should win those games. Those last two, the Bucks, that you could call that a coin flip. If you wanted to call the Bucks and Titans a coin flip, you could do that. But I'm looking at it, and I see at least two more wins on their schedule, which would put them at 10. So you have a solid 10-win team there that should be making the playoffs. And the Colts and the Texans, they got to ace the rest of their schedule to basically pass you at this point. So, and listen, do not discount the healing power of the Dolphins section. Trevor Lawrence, hang out with Aaron Rodgers, do the psychedelics, listen to the Dolphin sex sounds. But, listen, I proposed on Twitter today as a joke that the Chiefs trade Bobby Stroop to the Jags for a few weeks for a first-round pick, but Bobby answered back and, said he knows his value. So it doesn't sound like awesome. That trade's going through.
That's so awesome. I will say this, me and you, even though we disagree about Trevor Lawrence, we do agree. I think the Jags are going to win that division. I know they only got a 1-game lead over Houston and Indianapolis, but I don't see either one of those teams leapfrogging Jacksonville. I think it was a hiccup on Monday night. They're going to win that division. Now, in the playoffs, are they going to advance? That's a different story.
Right.
But I do think that they win the South. I still got them winning the South. Bad loss, really bad loss on Monday night. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, they're still going to go to the playoffs and win that division. Super Bowl contenders. We got Lions 3, Ravens 4, Dallas at 5, Philly at 6, and Miami at 7. I'm going to ask about the team you got at number 3 for our Lions fans here. The Detroit Lions at number 3. Second best team in the NFC?
Yeah, so actually this is the only difference really here is last week I believe I had the Lions at 4. So the only difference on my Super Bowl contenders, I believe, is flip-flopping the Lions and the Ravens. And part of the reason for that is because, I think what we saw from Green Bay kind of, it lets the Lions off the hook a little bit. But don't get me wrong, and I can't believe I'm saying this at this point of the season. I'm very optimistic on the Lions, and I'm very optimistic on their future moving forward. But if I was a Lions fan, based on what I saw Sunday night, I would be very concerned because that Packer team doesn't look like, just because Aaron Rodgers is gone, that division is going to be yours, moving forward. Maybe it will be this year, but I'm not so sure it's going to be that close to a gimme next year. And this is coming from someone who, Dan, as you know better than anyone, has not been a believer of Matt LaFleur or Jordan Love. So
I didn't believe in Jordan Love at all. I really didn't. Am I nuts that he outplayed Mahomes? I said that on the live stream, but I mean, let me ask a Chiefs fan who's wearing a Sweet 15 jersey. Did Jordan Love outplay Mahomes? Is that fair? I thought he did.
He did. If I answer this question, I'm kind of getting into my Chiefs ranking. So I can answer it if you want me to.
Yes, go ahead.
Right. So, and I'm not through the whole game again, rewatching it, even though the NFL released my all 22 after 1 day instead of 2 days like it's normally been. But I have watched enough to at this point where, it's kind of like, it's hard because it's going to sound like some of people's argument, for Brock Purdy. But basically what I saw on film it had something to do with Jordan Love, obviously. But what I saw on film from Green Bay's offense looked a lot like San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
It looked a lot like they were, and this is hard for me, Dan. I recorded like 5 or 6 clips because I'm just like, as a football fan, and I'm getting better over the last couple of years at being a pure football fan instead of just a Chiefs fan, to where I can appreciate some of this. The things Green Bay did on offense were beautiful. Like they were doing a lot of motion. They were, just causing chaos throughout the game, whether it was, their fullback, I can't think of his name, number 44,
mm-hmm.
Watching him and watching their tight ends and moving them interchangeably, lining him up as a tight end at times, lining their tight ends up as fullbacks at times. It reminded me a lot of the whole Kittle Juszczyk. You had a lot of the fullback would be lined up as a tight end. They'd motion him back. He'd curl around the quarterback and or Jordan Love and the halfback. There was a play where he did that, and then he was a lead blocker as Love tossed it. Then they had a play action, the second drive built off of that. They just had a lot of motion. They had the tight end coming in motion a lot. They had a receiver, either faking the end around. I still think it was an option, where Jordan Love could hand it to the receiver or, the running back. So they were doing a lot of the Kyle Shanahan misdirection thing, right? That makes it very friendly for a quarterback. And I kind of alluded to this earlier. It took Green Bay's offensive line most of the season to get healthy and start to gel. I don't think it is a coincidence that the offense looks this great now that they're, starting to really come together. So I don't think I could say that it's Jordan Love per se, because I also felt like, Green Bay's defense, to me, the coaches were outcoached. It wasn't that Mahomes was outplayed by Jordan Love. It was Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo were straight out coached in this game. And if they hadn't beaten the Lions, I think you would say, this was their Super Bowl, and not that it necessarily wasn't their Super Bowl. But what I saw looked like their coaching staff was very meticulous. Like LaFleur looked like he knew every single one of Steve Spagnuolo's zones. He knew all of his rules, how to have his routes to manipulate them. They had the stress of all the motion, but they were, there were plays where they had basically 7-man protection and Jordan Love, right? So, or eight men. I think it was, they only had 2 receivers on one play. The Chiefs had 7 guys in zone. It was a 20, 25-yard completion, 7 against 2. And to me, when I saw that, and I saw it over and over again, it's like Matt LaFleur knew how to create the holes and knew the limitations of Steve Spagnuolo's zone. Now, maybe it was a mistake to play as much zone as they did, but he still knew how to manipulate the hell out of it. So to me, Jordan Love made the throws he was supposed to make, and he had good accuracy when he did it. But the coaching staff, Matt LaFleur, the offensive coaching staff, put him in a huge position to succeed. And defensively, it was the exact opposite. Andy Reid just hasn't looked like he has an answer for some of the zones that 2023 defensive coordinators are throwing out there. And we still have a lot of our same questions about, the wide receivers and spacing and running routes and knowing how to manipulate zone and all of that. But I didn't think Patrick Mahomes had a bad game.
No,
he missed a few throws. He made a couple bad decisions. But that's every single quarterback, every game. But to me, it was coaching on both sides. That was the story of the game. And to explain my number 2 ranking, it's even with all of that, it still came down to a play or two. It came down to, maybe a bad decision by Andy Reid, 1 or 2 of them, or, even a very untimely penalty or 2. And you could talk about the refs if you wanted to, but penalties are what they are. There's 2 or 3 plays in this game that would have completely swung it, even with that. So for me, I'm much higher now. Green Bay went from 17 to 9, because of what I saw from their coaches and the execution on both sides in this game. I think they are a legit team if they can play like that and coach like that every single week. But to me, it was still a very winnable game for Kansas City, even with all that. So I didn't see an AFC team worth bumping up and knocking down Kansas City with that, because I might bump Green Bay up even higher next week, depending on what happens.
Green Bay had this weird thing where their receivers caught the ball. You throw it and it hits them in the hands and they hold on to it. They drafted a tight end out South Dakota State. I think I kept on getting his name wrong. Hard to believe I got his name wrong. It's Tyler or Tucker Croft, and he was injured the first part of the season, but now he's healthy. He only had 10 catches coming into the game. He had 4 or 5, and you could see the athleticism that he played with. He really was a problem for the Chiefs, and I think part of that was not having Tranquil in there. I think this game could be a lot different just with Drew Tranquil in there. And look, injuries are part of the game, but Cochran's a special teams guy. For him to be winding up, trying to make plays and stuff like that, it's not what they want. It'll be kind of interesting because are we going to see Nick Bolton back as Leo Chenal? I thought Leo Chenal was going to line up as the middle linebacker. They got a little creative and were using him as an edge rusher, but I'll go ahead, brother.
I was going to say, to be fair, a lot of what I saw, this was before Drew Tranquil was injured, so it was they knew how to manipulate Steve Spagnuolo's coverage, but yeah, I'm with you there. But so that's kind of my explanation for my Lions ranking is, I don't think that Green Bay loss is embarrassing by any means. And I still, just looking at their schedules, right? Looking at the Lions remaining schedule and looking at the Ravens remaining schedule is kind of the difference maker of why I have the Lions at 3 and the Ravens at 4, because the Ravens play all the remaining games are against teams that I have, with the exception of the Rams, who are the first potential wild card. The rest of them are playoff teams.
Another thing about Green Bay is that I kept on getting his name wrong too. It was Jalen Reed or Jaden Reed. He was a second-round pick early in the second round out of Michigan State. If one pride was here, he can comment on his former Spartan. Now, at the time, a lot of people thought it was a reach, but he had a massive impact on this game. He had some end arounds, a lot of really good catches, which is kind of a weird foreign concept for Chiefs players. What it is, you throw the ball and you fucking catch it. And Reed is a rookie. I think he had something like 8 catches over 100 yards. He had some end arounds. Yeah, Tyler Croft, a rookie tight end, also had some big plays. They also had a 5th-round rookie. I'm drawing a blank on his name right off the top of my head, but what Green Bay did in the draft with drafting 3 rookies. By the way, they had an undrafted rookie tight end who played, I think, like 30 to 40% of the snaps as well. So 3 wide receivers, 2 tight ends in the draft. Jordan Love development. Yeah, there's a lot of things to like about Green Bay. And Jordan Love said after the game, like, hey, look, when this schedule came out, I circled that Chiefs game, and I think the coaching staff did too. And I do think that the Packers outcoached Kansas City. Yeah, I'll stand by it. I thought Jordan Love outplayed Mahomes, but the one issue is that Jordan Love has this weird thing where he throws the ball to the wide receivers and they catch it. It's just so fucking weird, and Chiefs don't have receivers that can do that. Perry asks, he has some great questions here. Can Lamar get the ball to OBJ in the playoffs when games get tough? I mean, that's the $1 million question. I mean, well, we're going to find out, man. I mean, we're going to find out. We don't know that. We don't know that yet. Belichick shows Tom Brady. I think so. I kind of like to see Belichick with that top 5 pick and see what he does in the draft. But we're going to find out. It's going to be a great offseason. Jimmy Cornstar Slayer G is a solid starter and healthy in the right system. I'm kind of wondering if him and McDaniels go back to New England and work something out. Maybe the Raiders get a draft pick from New England. Maybe New England, or I'm sorry, maybe the Raiders are happy they didn't know O'Connell and want to build the team around them. Be some interesting things there. This is a question that you posted, and I'm a little behind on the comments here, but Perry, this is a great question. I want to ask Keas this. Eric Bieniemy should go be a college head coach. Keas, what are your thoughts on this one?
I don't think his personality would make it in the college game.
Yeah,
I personally don't, and here's the other thing, right? If he doesn't interview well, what's the chances he's going to recruit well? And you have to be a top-notch recruiter in college football if you want to have a chance to win. It doesn't matter. Yes, X's and O's matters, but it doesn't matter how good your X's and O's are if you can't bring in the players. And you have to be, you have to be good at talking to people and with people to do that. And so to me, if it's true he's not a good interviewer, I don't think he can be a good recruiter, and thus I don't think he can be successful in college.
He had one season as he went to college at the University of Colorado, and he had one season as Colorado Buffalo's offensive coordinator, and he was fired after that one season. They had it was like the 120 something ranked offense. If he doesn't get a head coaching job, Keas said it first. I'm going to take credit for it later on, Keas, but Keas said it first. The perfect place for Eric Bieniemy to go as offensive coordinator would be the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's like a hand in the glove. I got to think Tomlin and Bieniemy would just get along great. Former running backs coach with 2 really good running backs. I think that works great. I really think that would work great. And by the way, it wouldn't surprise me if Eric Bieniemy gets the head coaching job in Washington or gets another one of these head coaching jobs. There could be 7 or 8 available. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I'll
throw out another one, Dan. If not Pittsburgh, wherever Vrabel goes.
Oh, that would be awesome. Yeah, that would be awesome. I hate to say this, but when if the Chargers get a new head coach, if he goes to L.A., I mean, it'll be we're gonna have fun here. Hatters House 710, go Lions, NFC South, and I love it. Yeah, they swept the NFC South, and they did a really good job against the NFC North. It's not locked up. I mean, you got a 2-game lead, with 5 to go. Actually, let me make sure I'm saying that right. It's actually, I'm sorry, I lied. It's a 3-game lead with 5 to go. So now you do have to play the Vikings twice. So but there's a very good chance that you will be the first division winner.
I think they sweep the Vikings, but I also think that's one reason that, you put the Lions ahead of the Ravens. Like, they both are 9-3 right now. If you look at their records, which one looks like it's going to have a clearer path to win 4 games, because the Ravens play both the Dolphins and the 49ers. And I think those could be losses, so I think it's going to be harder for them to get to 4-1 the remaining stretch than it is for the Lions, simply by virtue of the Lions' remaining schedule. They're outside of the Cowboys. You have the Bears.
17 against the Cowboys. That could be for the number 1 seed in the NFC. It really could. It really could. I mean, that game against the Cowboys, that's for big stakes.
Right, but I mean, before and after that, you have the Bears, the Broncos, and the Vikings twice. So, they could easily go 4-1 there. And I think their path to that is a lot easier than the Ravens having to play both the 49ers and the Dolphins.
Oh, I see exactly where you're coming from. If Dallas beats Philly, which is possible, it's in Dallas. Philly, Dallas, San Francisco, well, unless San Francisco loses, and Detroit would all have 3 wins. And so if Detroit beats Dallas, Detroit could end up with the 1 seed. And how much fun would that be if Detroit ends up with the 1 seed, which is very, very possible. Perry says our defense is suspect, and AG, our DC, doesn't adjust what teams do. When you score 33 points, you should be in control for the win. The Packers are a solid team. I have to admit, I was really impressed with what they did coaching-wise against the Chiefs. I was really impressed with Jordan Love. I think they started the season like 2-5. I thought there's a good chance LaFleur could be fired. Remember, they traded their starting corner before the trade deadline to get a 3rd-round pick. I thought that was going to be for a quarterback. With the offensive skill position, players developing nicely, and Jordan Love looking really good over the last couple of weeks, I had a huge man crush on Lucas Van Ness. I'm pretty sure Keas likes him as well. Former Iowa Hawkeye, unlimited potential. So the front 7 solid. And now you are in a good position, even if you do make the playoffs, because you have some extra draft capital, you have an extra 2nd and an extra 3rd-round pick. You could trade up into the draft and get a franchise left tackle, which looks like the when I look at the Packers team, like I go into the offseason, left tackle's the number 1 need, and you have the draft capital to trade up and get that. So, but there's a lot of people think Aaron Glenn's an excellent defensive coordinator. They kind of got to win out. But when they play the Cowboys, that's going to be a huge game in a couple of weeks. But me and Keith both agree that the Lions are going to win the NFC North, even if Aaron Glenn has some problems adjusting. And he's going to get some opportunities to be a head coach. I was curious if he's interested in one of these college jobs, but those are filling up a lot faster than I thought. So if he does get an offer, it'll be as an NFL head coach. So.
I'll just say this. One thing I've noticed, at least over the last 2 maybe 3 years, to his defense, if you watch a lot of games where the teams are, at least fairly close talent-wise, which is most most teams really are fairly,
No.
I'm using that word a little bit loosely, but fairly close, talent-wise, like in Alabama and Georgia, most games, unless you're playing like a Panthers team, right? Or, if you want to throw the Bears or how the Patriots are right now. In most games, what I've noticed is that the team that is in the lead in the first half, that gets flip-flopped in the second half. Maybe part of that is the way games are called by the refs, but it really seems like, generally speaking, teams like switch the second half. If you have a lead the first half, the offense doesn't do as much the rest of the game, while the opposing team's offense does. And I'm saying that in general. So, whether you're talking about Aaron Glenn or most any defensive coordinator, I would say watch that from week to week. You see that happening. I mean, it's just the way, the way it seems to go. Whether it's the halftime adjustments, if there are any, or what, it just seems to be the way games flow.
Another thing I'll say, Perry, is that you got. I was told by One Pride that Jack Campbell was wearing the green dot. He was a rookie. Brian Branch, a rookie. CJ, a big free agent acquisition, injured early on. Mosley, one of your free agent corners, injured. Both those guys were projected to be starters. They're out for the year, and you're replacing them with rookies. Aiden Hutchinson, as good as he is, he's still a second-year player. And James Houston, who was a key sacker, he's injured. I think he's out for the year as well. So, I mean, you had some injuries, you got some youth, and he's done a good job. As far as making adjustments, I've heard that from a few people, but when you have a lot of young players, it's a little harder. Sometimes it's better to play, don't think. I was watching Denver and Houston. Will Anderson commented that the difference between an Alabama system and what the Houston Tech. I can't believe I forgot the head coach's name. The Houston Texans head coach. I'm drawing a blank. Anyway,
D'Amico Ryans.
He says biggest system in Ryan's system is that if you're thinking, you're losing. He just wants you to play full speed. Or Nick Saban defense, it's constantly a thinking game, and it was completely different. When you have a young team, you really don't make that many adjustments. I thought one of the coaching moves that Green Bay made against the Chiefs is that when they realized that they were going against a guy who's not used to playing, they made some adjustments there and some really good things. And you got to do that sometimes. But look, if you got a rookie, you got a rookie in the secondary, you got a rookie middle linebacker, second-year player, Aiden Hutchinson, who looks really good. Maybe you don't have the ability to make the adjustments, and it doesn't matter when you're putting up 30 points a game.
And that's a good point. But, I think inversely, there's a couple points with that. And one of them is you've given up 7 points in the first half. So as a defensive coordinator, what the hell do you have to look at for adjustments, to make at halftime? Things for the most part are working out because you have only given up 7 points, and so, but the other thing is you see this on the opposite side. If you look at that box score, why the hell did the Lions only go on to score 3 in the second quarter, 3 in the third quarter, and 6 in the fourth quarter? Well, because teams make adjustments. Well, where was Ben Johnson's adjustments? Well, again, it kind of goes to that. Well, at some point, you run out of adjustments to make, or if you scored 24 points in the first half, you go in at halftime, and realistically, what the hell adjustments do you have left to make at halftime? So to me, that's a huge part of it. And at the end of the day, from what I've seen, if coaches are great, pregame or halftime adjustment coaches, they're not very good in-game, with in-game adjustments. I have rarely seen a team that looked like it was really good at in-game adjustments.
And one thing about the Saints is that that's a veteran defense. From what I'm gathering from the box score is that I looked up, it was like 7-14-21, and then it was like 5 minutes left in the first. That's an experience. Dennis Allen's an experienced defensive coordinator, experienced defensive team. They probably made some adjustments. And when you're up 21-0, I mean, what are you adjusting?
Right. I mean, it's working. So
exactly. Yeah. Mosley. So Mosley was injured, and then he was slated to be. I thought he was slated to be your starter. Some of you guys kind of argued with that, and then he got injured. I want to say week 3 or 4, but you're right. It was a high risk, high reward, but I didn't like the signing because you had him slated to be a starter, but he's missed at least 5 games in every single season. The good news is you got Brian Branch, who's come in and really, really solidified that secondary and really, really helped out. But Mosley, by the way, is a good player when he's healthy. He's just he's the most he's played in the NFL season is 12 games. So I mean, the Packers played the Giants. That should be a win for them if they keep playing the way they have the last 2 weeks. Perry, if you haven't already, it's a really, really, really fantastic video. Please check it out. Please check out all my picks. So do check it. You didn't like it. Yeah, I thought it was bad move. Jack Campbell took some time. Yeah. Jordan Love took some time to adjust the NFL. Sometimes guys just aren't ready to play. And we've gotten to a point that if you're not ready to play right away, you're not throwing for 400 yards a game, your first game in the NFL, you're a bad pick. Sometimes this takes some time. So, Jack Campbell will be just fine. He'll be just fine. Keas, we've been on for like 2.5 hours, so I know that you got to get going and doing some things. I ran out of water, so like my throat's like rapidly dying here. I do want to touch base on this. Super Bowl favorites, 49ers and Chiefs. I was hoping you could elaborate that even with a loss, why are the Chiefs still the best team in the AFC?
Oh man, I thought I already did that. Again, it comes back to, if you look at their losses, with the exception of the Broncos loss, to me, I think we're going to see by the end of the season, the Packers are a playoff team. Mm-hmm. And maybe a playoff team that's not even necessarily one and done, depending on how things fall and if they continue to progress based off of the Lions game and the Chiefs game. But, part of it comes down to, if you look at these losses, for as bad as the offense has been, right? And it's came down to drops, untimely penalties, and I mean, I think more disturbing is some wide receiver coaching issues. But even in the midst of all of that, you have a 1-point loss, against the Lions without Chris Jones and Travis Kelce and Charles Omenihu. You have what did it end up being against the Eagles? Like, looking at all 3 of these games, it's like 1 or 2 plays or 1 or 2 penalties. And we're talking about a team that has 1 loss, an inexplicable loss to the Broncos. And so I don't think you can make a legitimate argument for anyone other than the Ravens. But at the end of the day, you have the best head coach in the NFL, the best quarterback in the NFL, and a team that has played really great defense and the best kicker in the NFL, which ultimately even with all their issues, the one thing they really need to work on is their red zone offense, right? Instead of kicking so many field goals, actually getting more touchdowns. They are, they still have, even with all these issues, Dan, it's crazy that I have to throw out this qualifier, but even with all these issues, they still have a top 10, offense. They are 8th in yards per game. You know how many yards per game they're behind the Ravens?
How many?
3.5. 3.5 yards a game. We're talking about a team that, we're talking about this offense as if it's completely dysfunctional. But even with that dysfunction, we're 3.5 yards per game behind the Ravens, which is insane to think about. The biggest difference here, again, is the points. It's scoring touchdowns instead of field goals. And you have to think with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they're going to get that figured out. Whatever that takes, whatever that looks like, they're going to get that figured out.
Yeah, we're a couple Chiefs fans, so there's some bias here, but in all four of the losses, I never looked at any one of those teams and said, this is a better team. It looked to me very obvious that the Chiefs had a better team. It's just that in the case of the Lions, the Eagles, the Packers, and like they played an 8+ game. Like they had this game circled, and it looked like the Chiefs just rolled like a C+, B- game. It looked like it was the best out of 3 or a best out of 5. The Chiefs easily win those games. And look, I'm a homer. I'm going to admit it, but I didn't look at. I haven't seen a team that the Chiefs have played and said like that's just a better team. And it looks pretty obvious that the Chiefs are, they haven't played a team that they're not better than. But that's number 2. Number 1 on the list is the San Francisco 49ers with a blowout win on Monday night against the Eagles. Keas, man, kind of elaborate here. Super Bowl favorite. Would they beat Kansas City this time around?
As the teams look right now, I would have to say yes. Again, when I looked at the Green Bay offense, it looked to me pretty similar to that San Francisco 49ers offense. But at the same time, I didn't think Kansas City was going to beat the 49ers last year during the regular season. So if you want to argue the opposite, I would understand that. If we're talking about Nick Bolton's back healthy, they're playing in the Super Bowl. Brian Cook's back healthy. They're playing in the Super Bowl. The offense has, if they're playing in the Super Bowl, I'm going to assume the offense has figured enough out, right? I think if that's the case, this defense looks better than the defense that beat the 49ers last year. Andy Reid knows how to, he almost completely eliminated Nick Bosa last year. He knows how to do some of those things. He's coached against Kyle Shanahan now, 2 out of the last 3 or 4 years, including Super Bowl 54, and come out on top. So I think it really would come down to health and the Chiefs coaching staff, because right now they don't look like they have the energy to, or they don't look like they've been willing to, I'll put it that way, to put an effort into their game plans and their scouting and their coaching.
I really 100% agree. I've said this many times. If San Francisco's healthy, that's the best team in football. But is Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Brock Purdy, going to be healthy? I doubt it. But if they are, then yeah, I think that I'm, as much as I would hate to do it, I'd probably might put San Francisco. I'll be honest, if San Francisco came into the Super Bowl completely healthy, I think they would be favored. But that means that I think that they would win out and be completely healthy. But even on just one of those guys, you take away George Kittle, you take away Deebo Samuel, you take away Christian McCaffrey, any one of those guys is out, then I would take Kansas City, whether they're favored or not. Perry says, hopefully Jack Campbell can play well. I know. I apologize. I spent all day today working on my video. I watched NFL Live, and pardon the interruption. I literally finished Pardon the Interruption like 10 minutes before I was going to come on. I was texting Keas like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm running late. He was mad at me because I didn't put an outline. When I say that, he wasn't mad at all because he's awesome and he has a great show, and he always comes to the show prepared with some really great insight in this fantastic chart with his teams 1 through 32 listed, and I think it's fantastic. We have some disagreements, but that's people, that's fans, that's everything. You're gonna have some things that you disagree. The one thing I don't know, Perry, is how many weeks, or is he gone for the year? I don't know that. I should. I'll look at. I'll kind of research it because he was having a great year. I actually thought that he might be a weak link, and he's a strength. He's having an amazing year. I don't know how long he's going to be out. Keys, do you know off the top of your head, is he out for the year, or is it just a few weeks?
We're trying to look now, see if I can find anything.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. We've been on for over 2.5 hours. Keys was very nice in order to come on. This is a great show. And by the way, Keys will be on YouTube tomorrow. The link to his channel is below. So if you're not already, make sure you subscribe to the Bak Talk Brothers. They'll be on tomorrow night. It'll be a good show. Keys, before we get out of here, man, any final thoughts, comments, suggestions, anything you want to add, say?
I'll say it every week, any given Sunday. So, even putting these rankings out and talking records, anything can happen. And we've already seen that, throughout the season. But, we have no idea what's going to happen here. We think we do, but who knows what could happen? You could see a team like the Packers just go on a run and just run right through, the playoffs, because ultimately it's about what teams are getting better. And, some of these teams, they're able to execute better because they have smaller playbooks. But then once you get to the playoffs, it's a lot easier for defensive coordinators to attack those teams. And I'm sure that's one reason, like for you, Dan, you don't see the Dolphins going that far in the playoffs. So
no, I do not. You nailed it completely. I'm just going to end it on this here. All my social media links are below. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I still use Facebook. I'm like one of the 3 people left. So you send me a friend request. Send me some stuff. You can send me stuff that's not
spam
related. Please do not send me spam. I will warn you. I'm not joking when I say this, even though it's going to sound like a joke. If you send me a corn, you will be blocked. So, but do subscribe to my the OnlyFans is a joke, but my picks video is below. It's really good. Make sure you check it out, and I'll be back on Friday.